Eisenhower seemed perfectly healthy in these films made in 1955, just before his sudden heart attack. His illness revealed once again America's unpreparedness to deal adequately with such an emergency. Stricken at Denver, Colorado home of Mrs. Eisenhower's mother, the president was helped into a car in the early morning hours, rushed along this street to the Fitzsimmons Army Hospital, and placed in an oxygen tent. Meanwhile, leaving Washington for Denver were Press Secretary James Haggerty and Colonel Thomas Mattingly, a heart specialist from Walter Reed Army Hospital. In the Denver church where Ike worshiped, in churches and synagogues all across a shocked nation, America joined in spirit with Vice President Nixon, facing grave burdens in a situation not adequately defined by constitutional law. Summoned to the hospital for an emergency consultation, a famed Boston heart specialist, Dr. Paul Dudley White, declared prospects were reasonably good for the president's recovery. Hurrying to his father's bedside was then Major John Eisenhower, who was to join all America in an anxious vigil. For 48 days of the demanding Cold War era, America waited. Then the president returned to Washington. Accompanied by Mrs. Eisenhower, Ike was relaxed and smiling. But concerned Americans were bent upon preparing for such an emergency should it ever happen again. Said Ike,
"I am happy the doctors have given me at least a parole, if not a pardon, and I expect to be back at my accustomed duties, although they say I must ease my way into them and not bulldoze my way into them."
Washington affectionately welcomed the president, who ultimately recovered, as leaders in business, government, and industry breathed a sigh of relief. Part of the reaction to the national emergency had been this. Only 2 days after Ike's seizure, stock market values tumbled over $12 billion in value. This time we had been lucky. After a weekend in Washington, the Eisenhowers prepared to leave for their Gettysburg farm, where the president completed his recuperation. The welcome sign was out as school children got time off to join in the reception for Gettysburg's #1 resident. Thanking his neighbors, Ike said this:
"To each of you who's come out this morning, to each of the school children who along the way who's waved his little flag or his hand and called a greeting, our very deep thanks. We are truly grateful to all of you. Goodbye."
This emergency elevated the vice presidency to unprecedented importance among the political milestones of the century.